We're holding here Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph. We have just started the Perek Hamoitzi Yayin, which speaks about different measurements of liquids, which size, which quantity of liquid is significant for when someone takes it out from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabbi. He's only chayiv if he took out something significant. What is called significant? So for many of the liquids, we say the sizes are revis, the amount is a revis. For wine, we said the amount is enough wine to mix in with water for a cup. Which cup? Depends how much you want to drink. Says the Braisa, for a cup of a bracha, for brichas hamazon, he's supposed to bench with a cup of wine, depending when, mezuman, or whatever it is, but or some people say even alone, but he's supposed to bench with a cup of wine, and the amount of wine you need in order to mix with water, in order to have a proper cup for brichas hamazon. Now, you still didn't answer my question. How much is that? Now, what every child knows today, and everyone learned Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and everyone knows that for Kiddush, and for Arbakoisis, and for Brichas Hamazon, you need to have a revius of wine. Now, obviously, in those days, they didn't have Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and they were trying to figure out from the Yesodis of Teresh Shel Peh all these halachas. So that wasn't so clear. So he didn't answer my question. How much wine do I have to take out in order that I should be chayiv? The amount to mix with water. For what? For a cup of Brichas Hamazon. And how much is that? Comes Rav Nachman in the name of Rabbi Baravua, and he says the amount is a quarter of a revis, because usually you mix wine with a quarter wine, 3/4 of water, so the final sum will be a revis. Says Rabbi, you're right. I could prove what you're saying from our Mishnah. What could he prove? Rabbi had the assumption, the same assumption Rabbi Baravua had, that if you want to mix wine with water, the proper amount will be a quarter wine to 3/4 water. That was his assumption. He didn't have to have any proof for that. His only question was, okay, a quarter wine, 3/4 of water, but how much total do you have to have for a koshel bracha? That didn't say anything. So he says from our Mishnah we could prove that it's a revius. How come? Because it says that all other liquids, by default, how much liquid do you have to have a revis? So when it says that you have to have wine in order to mix into a cup, in order to make a kosher bracha, obviously it means to mix with water that the total should be a revis. So what we see from our Mishnah is that the total you're supposed to have from wine and water mixed together is a revis. And it's all based on Rabbi's assumption. Rabbi took for granted that the what do you call it again? Remind me the word. The
proportion.
Proportion of water to wine is a quarter wine to 3/4 of water. Let's see in the Gemara the last few words on Ayin Vav Amud Beis. Amar Rabbi said, Afanan nami tanino. Well, you said that a koshel bracha is a revius total of water and wine together. We see that in our Mishnah. Why? Because the Mishnah says, how much wine is significant if it's enough to mix in with water for a cup? How much is that? V'tani Allah, and it says in a Braisa, to mix with water for a nice cup, which goes on the cup of Birchas Hamazon, which he's supposed to make it nice. He's supposed to clean the cup before from inside and outside to make it nice for Birchas Hamazon. Okay, but how much is that? How much is the total? The Katani Seifa, and the Seifa of the Mishnah says, if nothing's specified, then how much of any liquid is significant? B'revis. So obviously when we say to mix into a cup, we mean to mix into a cup that will add up to a revis. So we see from our Mishnah that the total of wine and water together for a cup of bracha is a revis. Okay, but who tells you what Rav Nachman said, that it should be a quarter of a revis? Maybe the proportion of wine to water is more than a quarter, less than a quarter. We don't see that from the Mishnah that the proportion is a quarter to 3/4. Says the Gemara, that detail, Rava is following his opinion, what he holds. The Amar Rava, Kol chamra, any wine, the leidori, that the proportion isn't al chav klas mayim, that for one portion of wine you have 3 portions of water. Lav chamra, which means to say, if it's too much, if it's more water, it's too diluted. If it's less than that, then it's too strong. In those days, they had very strong wine, and it's not proper wine to drink. The proper proportion is a quarter wine, 3/4 of water. That's Rabbi's opinion. So Rabbi says like this, that what does it mean, kedei mizigas hakois? A quarter of a revius, that you could mix it with 3/4 water, which that's the proper way to mix wine with water, and then it'll be fit for a koishon bracha. Abaye says, no, I don't agree with you. In other words, he's not saying what he holds. All he's saying is you have no proof. Our Mishnah is not understood even with your whole explanation, and therefore you have no proof to Rav Nachman. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying you cannot prove it. Why? The one thing is that your assumption that wine and water is supposed to be 1/4 to 3/4, we have a Mishnah opposite than that. The Mishnah discusses in the olden days, in the time of the Mishnayos, when they would look for a dam nida to see if it's tummy or tor, it wouldn't be automatically if it's red, it's tummy. There would have to be a specific type of red. There were 4 types of red that were considered tummy, and the rest weren't considered tummy. Then later, even in the Gemara's time, it said that people weren't bucky in it, and then that's why it became that whatever red is tummy. But in time, the Gemara would depend. It was only 4 types of red. So the Mishnah says one of those types is mazug, like wine mixed with water. Well, how much wine to how much water? That's an an. So the Mishnah says v'hamazug. What's this color of wine mixed with water? Shnei chelkei mayim, 2/3 water, ve'echad yayin, and 1/3 wine. Min hayayin hashiroini, from wine that comes from the place in Eretz Yisrael, which is called sharoin. So we have a Mishnah which says that the proportion is not 1/4 to 3/4. The proportion is not 1 to 3; it's 1 to 2, 1/3 to 2/3. That's one problem I have with your explanation. Then I have another problem. Why is the wine 1/4 of a revi significant? Because you could mix it with water. You didn't. So I didn't carry the significant thing. I can't bench on this kalishke of wine. I can say l'chaim on it. I can't do anything significant with it. So mayim bekannt. The water is still in the jug. It's starving. I could join it along to this kalishka of wine that I'm taking and say I took something significant. What I took I know is not significant. No. I'm sticking to what I said. Your questions do not disprove my proof. Why not? So he goes like this. Your first question that you said, the Mishnah which says that the proportion is 1 to 2, not 1 to 3. Why does the Mishnah choose wine from Sharon? Wine from Sharon was a unique type of wine. That what? Derafi. It's more of a mild wine. It's not so strong. And therefore, you need less water to dilute it. If you put in 3 to 1 water, then it will be too diluted. But a regular wine, you put 3 to 1. That's one explanation. Inami, or Hasam Mishum Chazusa. So the Pashas is saying like this. He's not telling you how you're meant to mix water with wine in order to drink it, to have a proper taste of wine. Could be that even wine from Sharon, you should mix 1 to 3 wine to water. However, if you want to know the proper color of these 4 colors, for these 4 colors, which color is a proper color of blood, which is tamei, is the wine that's 1 to 2. So it's for a different subject. He's not telling you how to drink it. He's telling you when it's a proper color that you could match to it the color of the blood. So it's nothing to do with here. If you want to have a proper taste of wine, then you need to put more water. It'll be too strong. If you just put 1 to 2, you have to put 1 to 3. That's regarding your first question. You found the Mishnah which says that it's 1 to 2. That's regarding to compare the color of blood to it. But if you want to have the proper flavor of wine, you have to put 1 to 3. Now about your second question, with the Kamarta, you said, how can you put together to the measurement the water which is in the jug? I don't have anything significant right now. So how could I be chayiv? So he said, no, the Inyan Shabbos, midi the chashiv ba'inyan. We're now looking, do I have the shear now? Let's say if we'll be talking about Tumah v'Tayra. You have to have a kazayis, you have a kabeya, whatever it is. So if you don't have it, you don't have it. It's not here. Fine, I understand. Let's say if you want to make birchas hamazon, I'll put a quarter of a revius, and I'll say, since if I would have put water afterwards, it would have been proper wine. So now all I don't have is the water. Not a big deal. Water, not a big deal. So I'm going to make kiddush on a quarter of a cup of wine. No, obviously not. You don't have the water. On Shabbos, the question is what I have significant? It is. I could take it home and mix it with water. So I have something significant. I don't have to have the thing. I have to have the significance. I have to have the importance. So that's what he's saying. Le'inyan Shabbos, regarding Shabbos, needed the chashiv. We're not looking, do I have it? We're looking, is it important? V'hanami ha'chashiv. It is important. And therefore, Rava sticks to what he said, that Rav Nachman is right, and we can prove from the Mishnah, that what is this measurement of wine that you could mix with water? It means a quarter of a revius. Because if you mix it with 3 portions, 3 to 1 of water, you'll have a proper full revius of wine for birchas hamazon. That's it. Okay. That's the end of that. And it seems like Abai didn't even argue. Abai asked the question and he got an answer. Fine. End of argument. Now we're continuing to another part in continuation. Tamam learned in Rabbi, so Yomi. If I have dried out wine, the measurement is the size of a kazayis, size of an olive. Divi Rabbi Nosson. That's what Rabbi Nosson says. Which basically, what are we trying to assume? That a kazayis of dry wine is a concentrated quarter of a revius of liquiding wine. If you'll take a quarter of a revius and 1 second. No, I'm sorry. 1 second. I'm not sure why we're going now to a revius. I guess since you don't have liquid wine that you can actually mix with water, then you have to have that it's concentrated of the full shear. So concentrated wine of a revius turns into a kazayis. And therefore, if you take a kazayis outside, you're chayiv. Because there's a revius, a concentrated revius in this kazayis. So this logic that liquid, when you concentrate it, it turns into a kazayis. From a revius turns into a kazayis. Says the Gemara L'chayra, we find another Tana besides Rabbi Nosson, which says the same logic. The rule is like this, that 1 second. Yeah. Okay. So there's another machlokes which will be based on the same logic that a revius liquid turns into a kazayis of solid, of something dry. It's regarding to blood. The halacha is that a nevela, an animal which was not shechted properly, makes a person tummy. If he touched the kazayis of its flesh, of its meat, not of other parts, not of the bones, not of the skin of the meat. The question is the blood. Is the blood considered the meat, or is it considered not the meat? So Beis Shammai says it's not meat, and it's tar. Beis Hillel says it is meat, and it's tar. That's one of the unique cases that Beis Hillel is more machmir. Then comes Tana, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, and he says, how much blood does it have to be? A revius. By blood, the kazayis is not enough. Why? Because a revius, if it will dry out, it will turn into a kazayis. So we see l'chayda the same logic, that a revius of liquid, when it dries out, it turns into a kazayis. So Rabbi Nosson, which says that dry wine, if you carry it, it's a kazayis. And Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda, which says liquidy blood has to be a revius because that will dry out to be a kazayis, the l'chayda is saying the same exact logic. Let's see it inside. Amud Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Nosson, which just said that dry wine, not as in dry wine, but as in dried out wine that became solid, and then if you carry it, the amount that you'll be high with is a kazayis. But Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, as we'll see soon, Amud Davarech said the same thing. Rabbi Nosson had the Amor, Rabbi Nosson what we quoted just before. But Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, the time we went to Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Shisha Devarim, there are 6 things, Mikuli, Bishami, Mechumri, Bisilam. That Bishami, or Mekel, and Bisilam, Lamach, really there's much more. But there were 6 things that were mentioned at a time that they gathered together, and there was a person that stood up and he said, I remember 6 things. These were the 6 things that he mentioned. What were the 6 things? Dam nevela, the blood of a nevela, b'shamim yitarin, or b'silam yitarin. B'shamim says it's tum, b'silam says it's tum. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Av kishetimu b'silam, and b'silam said it's tum. Loitimu el b'dam sheyesh b'revis. They only said that it's tum if there's a revis of blood, not a kazayis of blood. Why? Hoyel, since v'yochel likrish, it can become hard, it can be turned into solid. V'lamed al kazayis, if it'll dry out, it will be a kazayis. So l'chayra we see that they both say the same logic, that a thick liquid, not water obviously, but something like wine or like blood, if a revis of liquid, if it dries out, it turns into a kazayis. Says, Amaya, 1 second. The consistency of blood and the consistency of wine are very different. You can't say a rule. A liquid which dries out turns into this amount of solid. Depends what liquid. If you'll take water, nothing will be left. If you'll take, I don't know what, depends how much solids there are inside in order to turn into a kazayis. So blood is much thicker, it's much more solid to it. Wine is much thinner, much less solids to it. So you can't compare the 2 opinions. On the contrary, you could say that these 2 opinions are arguing. If one says that from a revis,
the word is viscosity.
Viscosity. Okay, thank you.
How thick is the liquid?
Okay, so l'chayda, it sounds like l'chayda even the l'chayda arguing. If Rabbi Nosson says that from a revis of wine you get a kazayis of dried out wine, then l'chayda by blood will be much less. And if Rabbi Yosef Yehuda says that by blood, a revis of blood turns into kazayis of dried blood, so then by wine you'll need much more. Okay, let's. Amar Abaya, Dil Malohi, maybe that's not their machlekes. Maybe they're not saying the same thing. Ad Kanli Kamer Rabbi Nosson, maybe Rabbi Nosson never said that from a revis you get a kazayis. Hoch over here, the boy revis, they need to have a revis to turn into a kazayis. Or the beyayin the kolish. Wine that's much thinner. Aval b'dam the samich, blood that's much thicker, much more viscosity, whatever it's called. Kazayis li boy revis, much less than a revis will already turn into a kazayis. And the other way around, inami, or both could work, but let's say the other way around. Ad kan l'kamer Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda hasam the kazayis sagilei. When does Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda say that it's enough that the dried out the kazayis sagilei b'revis, that a revis is enough to make a kazayis ela b'dam desamich, blood which has a much thicker viscosity. Aval yayin the kolish, wine that's much thinner. Kazayis have a yosem revis in order to get if you have a kazayis, you already have much more than a revis. If you want to have a dried revis, you have, I don't know, a quarter of a kazayis maybe. By wine, even less than a kazayis will be chayv. Now, Rabbi Yosef said like this: listen, the truth is that even in blood, not all blood will turn out the same. Not all wine will turn out the same. So obviously, you have to follow rules. You have to follow set rules. So you follow set rules but I guess an average, a liquid from a revis, a thick liquid, a revis turns into a kazayis, and will apply it to wine and to blood equally. And Rabbi says no. Although you can't measure each liquid separately, but you can measure each type of liquid, make the average of that type of liquid. Don't put all liquids together, make the average of blood, the average of wine. Don't mix the two together. That's what's done by the machlokes between Rabbi Yosef and Abai. Okay. So now we're left hanging in the air. We don't know if these two Tanoi match, and whatever. But Rav Nosson says that dried out wine is a kazais, because that will be a revis. Right? Okay. Fine. That's that. So we spoke about Rava assumed, and Rav Nachman assumed, that if you want to have proper wine, you have to mix 1 to 3 wine to water. Abaye says, no, I have a Mishnah which says 1 to 2. Says Rava, 1 to 2 is a specific wine, a weaker wine. Wine from Shorim. Or 1 to 2 is when you want to have the proper color, which there will be a type of blood which is tum. But in order to have a proper flavor of wine, you have to have 1 to 3. How do we come to this idea of 1 to 3? Because we're trying to figure out, the Mishnah is telling us something unclear. That which amount of wine are you chayiv on when you carry it from Rishus HaYochid to Rishus HaRabim? The amount that you can mix it with water. How much wine, how much water? So then we say, the Bryce says it's the amount of wine you can mix with water to make a cup for benching. Okay, how much you need for a cup of benching? Says Rav Nachman, the name of Rabbi Revis. Says Rabbi, I can prove it from our Mishnah. Because the Mishnah said that any other liquid is a revis, and here you need enough to mix in with water for how much? Obviously for a revis. And obviously when the Bryce says it's for benching, it means that for benching you need a revis. Now how much wine do you need to mix with water for a revis? So Rabbi has his pre-assumption, his pre-knowledge, that it's 1 to 3. And he stays with that. Then we spoke about dried out wine. Comes Rav Nosson and he says, a kazayis. A kazayis will not up to a revis. Here it's not enough to have a quarter of a revis. If you have dried out wine, it has to be that it's contrary to the full revis. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda said that blood for nevela to become tamei, a revis of blood is tamei because then it will dry out and turn into a kazayis. So it seems to be the same thing, that a revis of liquid turns into a kazayis of solid. Says Abai, not necessarily. Blood is much thicker than wine. If you hold that a revis of blood makes a kazayis, then wine you'll need much more, and therefore less than a kazayis will already be the revis of wine. And if you hold that a revis of wine turns into a kazayis, my blood will need much less. Even less than revis will be tummy. So you can't compare the two. Now we go on to a much more technical part, which it sounds like this. It sounds like Rabbi, when he set up the Mishnayos, he would teach it before everyone, and they would write it down. And it sounds like that even in those days, not everyone was so careful with the proper pronunciation of Aleph and Ayin, as the Sfardim do, which is the proper way, which in the past, it couldn't be, a Chazan couldn't be Chazan, or Koyin couldn't do Birchas Koyin if he didn't know how to do this properly, because it could change the meaning. Rabbi said they still reading the Torah with the ayins and the cheses, but it sounds like that when they would speak Mishnayos, it wasn't davening, it wasn't reading in the Torah. Then they weren't so careful, and therefore they could have mixed up an aleph and an ayin. So when they were recording the Mishnayos, and the Rabbi was saying they're writing it down, so they could have had a question: what's the right spelling, an aleph or an ayin? So we're going to go through many Mishnayos that say a word that can be written both ways, and we'll see. We'll try to figure out based on Psukim, which there we do know clearly how it's written. So we'll try to figure out what's the right spelling. So the first example is in our Mishnah. It says that milk, if you take out the amount of 1 gulp, kedei gemiyah, 1 gulp, you're chayiv. Now, how do you spell the word gemiyah? Do you spell it with an ayin as it's written in our Mishnah over here? Or they spelled with an aleph. Says the Gemara, Kedei Gemiyah Yiboilu, there was a question. Kedei Gemiyah with an aleph, or Kedei Gemiyah with an ayin? Amar Rav Nachman, it said, look in the pasuk. Eliezer asked Rivka, Hagmi'eni no ma'at mayim mikadech. Let me drink some water from your jug, and it's spelled with an aleph. So the right spelling is with an aleph. Still in the Mishnayos, it's recorded with an ayin. And still in today's Hebrew, they still write it with an ayin. But if you said the proper way is with an aleph. And then we're going to go on to many more places. So that will already leave for tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem. So I think we summarized, you can take that summary from before, we summarized still here. And then we started this subject of how to spell these words, which could be with an aleph or with an ayin.